Hi, my name is Melissa McCarver. I'm a program coordinator at the Beaver Watershed Alliance, and this is Nate Weston, another program coordinator at the Beaver Watershed Alliance. The Beaver Watershed Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit in Northwest Arkansas. Our mission is to practically protect, enhance, and sustain the water quality of Beaver Lake and its tributaries. Today, we're at Beaver Water District to simulate different watershed scenarios with their stream table. What is a watershed, you ask?
A watershed is an area of land which concentrates rainwater into a central area, into rivers, streams, and lakes. And all that water exits that watershed through a flow point or a pour point into another watershed until it eventually reaches an ocean. What we're looking at today is this stream table, and it's filled with not sand, but a repurposed plastic. And what we're going to see is a natural stream bed on your left. It's sinuous, it meanders, and you see all these little trees that are on the side that demonstrate a healthy riparian area. And on the right, we have a channelized stream. And this channelized stream is meant to get the water from point A to point B as fast as possible, so the shortest distance to do that is a straight line. And we're going to see what happens when water interacts with that land around that channelized stream bed. In a developed area, in an urbanized landscape, they put this channel in to expedite the water's removal from point A to point B. And so you'd naturally have like sidewalks and housing developments and things like that on both sides of this stream. And this meandering that you're starting to see here isn't really accounted for. It's not really built into that kind of system. But this is what water naturally wants to do. And so as it's trying to reestablish its equilibrium by recreating this meander, or what we call remeandering, it's starting to scour out the sides of the channel. And as it's scouring out the sides of that channel, it's putting sediment, and it's eroding the sides of the stream bed, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that sediment, that soil, that mud moving downstream.
So meanders are natural in a stream. They help slow down the water, so it's not scouring the banks. You'll get some scour naturally. It's natural to have some sediment in streams. The organisms in streams need the nutrients like macroinvertebrates, which are early instars of insects that fly around. Like you'll see mayflies, stoneflies flying around. They spend part of their life cycle in the stream. When you have a low slope, you're gonna see a pretty low meander, but as you increase the slope, your meander is gonna increase. And this meander is the sinuosity of the stream. So here in Northwest Arkansas, we have gravel bed streams or bedrock streams. And so your meander width will change, but usually the riffle pool structure of a stream here in Northwest Arkansas, since we have that sediment or substrate size, is going to be 5 to 7 bankful widths, and bankful is the bank to bank till you get into the floodplain. So if you're looking at a stream here, this would be bankful. There's like an inflection point when the water goes into the floodplain. That inflection point is the bankful point. And so right here on this side of the stream table, that is right here, these slopes are kind of steep. It might be easier to see lower down here on the stream. So this point right here is the inflection point until it goes into the floodplain. And that is called bankful from side to side. So from this point to this point times 5, you'll usually see a riffle in a stream. And a riffle is the shallow area in a stream. You'll see a lot of rocks and a lot of surface to water interaction where it's kind of frothy. That's a riffle. And here in Northwest Arkansas, our normal habitat types are riffles, pools, and glides. So pool is a really deep area, usually where you go swim in a stream. And then the glide is a shallow area, but not as shallow as the riffle. And there's fast moving water. Glides and flats are they're a little bit different, but usually you'll see them between riffles and pools. And those are the different habitat types and streams up here. Now, sandy bottom streams are going to have a little bit different structure, but the habitat types are going to be the same. As you can see, we have some islands forming in this, and that's normal to happen. You'll see sediment flowing down, that's natural. And the urban stream over here that's very channelized, you'll see that it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider. There's nothing holding the banks in place. There's no trees like on the natural setting to help hold that sediment in place. And this adds a lot of nutrients to the water. So in our region, our main issue is phosphorus in the water, and that's not from just surface water runoff, it's the phosphorus in the soil. So that comes from, it's naturally occurring, and you need a little bit of phosphorus in the water, but not the load that's going in due to stream bank erosion. And to stop stream bank erosion, you have to plant lots of trees in your riparian area, or the area right next to the stream, which is called the riparian zone. About 100 feet is what you need to maintain a good enough buffer. Now, sometimes with as much urbanization as going on, that 100-foot buffer might not be enough. It depends what's going on in your watershed. If you have a lot of urbanization and deforestation happening, that 100-foot buffer might not help, because when you cut down trees, the water infiltration decreases. So the amount of water going into the soil is not as much. So where does that water go if it's not infiltrating? It's going to go into your stream. And when you get these large rain events like we've been seeing lately, where we get 5 inches of rain in an hour, your stream, all that water just rushes into the stream. And while it's supposed to go into the floodplain, but when it's not going into the floodplain, think of it kind of like water going through a pipe. You have a lot of pressure putting on those banks, and that bank's not able to handle that load because historically that's not the structure of the stream. It's not able to handle that much pressure. But when it goes out into the floodplain, that pressure, it's like a pressure release valve. You've just let all the water pressure go out, and that's what's supposed to happen. You don't want a channelized stream where you're wanting all the water to stay in the stream. You want it to get out into the floodplain.
So here's a good demonstration. On the left we have the channelized stream, and on the right we have the natural meandering sinuous stream. And let's look at these sediment traps down here below just to see what it's like. On the right you have the sinuous stream, and all those white particles are the sand or the plastic that's being collected into this trap. And over here on the left, this is the channelized stream. See the difference? This is all the mud, sediment, nutrients that are all going downstream, going into your lakes, into your reservoirs, into the ocean. And this sediment carries nutrients with it. And one of the big downsides of those nutrients is they cause what we call eutrophication, which is basically a nutrient buildup in a water system that causes toxicity, loss of oxygen, all kinds of bad problems. So an update on the channelized stream. We see it's widened out a little bit as the stream is naturally meandering, especially down here midway. It's causing a lot of erosion. You're seeing what we call scouring in the stream bed here. This point right here is of interest. We call this an incision point. As water is coursing through here, it moves into a channel. And with that water in the column, comes a lot of force. So this water is exerting its force on this stream bed. And as it does that, it scours out underneath the stream bed where the water comes in contact with soil. And when it continues to do that, it undermines it, or does what we call incising. And the more it incises, it creates a divot underneath. It creates a ledge. And as it does that, gravity pulls sediment and soil and ground down into the water above it. So this is what we're seeing right here. As we just watch it, we see more and more sediment falling into the stream. Further downstream, after this incision point, we see a creation of a natural delta. So one thing people oftentimes misunderstand and a misconception is streams stay in place. Basically, when you see a stream, that's a snapshot of where it is in the terrain at any given time. Over the course of hundreds or even thousands of years, that stream moves around a lot. And so that's kind of what the stream bed simulates. Earlier on, we had a straight shot through here, and as the stream naturally meandered, it carved out sediment and it deposited sediment elsewhere. And as it deposited that sediment, it changed its own path of least resistance. And in response to that, it moves to find a new path of least resistance. And so basically what it does is it flips and flops around like a fish's tail. So it started in the middle, it kind of moved to my right, your left, and then it shifted back over here. And we can still see several of those original channels. And this is what we see in especially large rivers like the Mississippi. You can find maps that show every channel in the Mississippi River over the past, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 years. And that's very similar to what we're seeing here. We're seeing another incision point over here. And as it's incising this stream bed, it also deposits sediment over here. And it's creating a new delta here. So like I was saying originally, streams naturally want to meander. And we see that channelized stream up here. It stayed remarkably stable. But down here, when we start seeing that interaction with the stream bank, it starts becoming, in an engineer's sense, unstable, and it starts meandering more. And in an urban environment, that causes complications that we don't really want to see. So like we have this house right here, and we have a problem. We've got water underneath our house. And fast forward, some time, we're going to see this house is going to go into the stream. And so this is what we have when this is why we have laws that say you can't build in the floodplain and things like that. And we don't really see it so much up here, but we see a great example here. The stream is naturally meandering. So we got this nice inflection point right here. We got this nice S-shaped structure. And this is what we'd see if we could expand this stream table another 20 feet or so. We'd see a nice sinuosity going downstream. So in an urban setting, say we have a strongly channelized stream with 5-foot banks on both sides, and it's scoured out. Normally what happens is when channels start to do this, the natural human reaction is to come along and scour out or dredge some of that soil out. So we're going to do that. We're going to say, hey, my channel is getting out of hand, so we're going to scour it. Initially what happens whenever someone does this is you have a head cut that forms at the point where they scoured or dredged, and that head cut just moves upstream. And as it does that, it's depositing and eroding the stream bed itself, so it's deepening itself, or self-scouring as they say. And a head cut is basically a ledge that you can't really see underwater. We have one that's actually forming right here. You see how that disturbance upstream is depositing this material downstream, and it's forming this little ledge that's right underneath the water. In time, what's going to happen is as water moves over this ledge, it's going to interact with that surface, and it's going to scrape sediment off of that again. So it looks stable right now. It looks like it's building a stable system, but it's not. When it does that, it's going to take all that sediment and it's going to flush it back downstream. And in the scenario where we have an urban setting, we have sidewalks and houses on both sides, we keep scouring out that stream. In a flood event, let's see what happens. So we're going to raise this up from 1 to 3. So we're going to say we have a heavy storm. We got more water flowing down the stream, we got more erosion, and we might not see it in this short amount of time, but what we'd see is a complete collapse of this system in here. We'd start seeing more of this sand falling into the stream. It would straighten out. And if you have a very small channel where that water can't go anywhere like it can here, so you have concrete walls on both sides of this, the water comes out, spills out over those sidewalks, goes into the neighborhood, causes flooding, causes issues like that. And that's literally just because the water has nowhere to go. It can't exert that force anywhere else like it can over here. And so it's just exerting it on the sides of the stream, causing that erosion and flowing outside of the channel and causing flooding and all kinds of problems.
So over here, as Nate was saying, that channel is channelized. Those towns want to keep that stream within its banks. But over here in a natural setting, with the low slope that we have, the channel is becoming braided. You can see the water going through different areas, like it's coming from here and over here. If you have a steep slope, it's going to stay in just one meander. But over here we have multiple channels forming and islands forming in the middle. That happens when you have a low slope. You have multiple routes the water goes through, and you'll see that in the delta of Arkansas. You'll see many braided channels. In northwest Arkansas, we don't usually have those braided channels. We have one meander. And as you can see, our trees are falling in. And you might think, oh no, that's bad. But it's not. We need large wood to fall into streams. Organisms need that, such as macroinvertebrates. It provides them food. That food from outside sources is called allochthonous. And in headwater streams or low order streams, organisms need that allochthonous material. And when you move downstream where the channel widens and you don't have the trees falling in, or you just have a lot wider stream section, the sunlight's hitting the stream. So that creates algae, which is called autochthonous material. So it's made within the stream. And this large wood that falls in not only provides food for macroinvertebrates and fish, but it also provides habitat for species as well. So you need that. It's not a bad thing for trees to fall in, or leaves, or to fall in the stream. The stream requires it. You just don't want too many to fall in due to an unstable bank. So these trees, as you can tell, like, there's probably more than needs to be, but if you have really great root systems, obviously these don't, they will stay in the bank. River birch and other native species are great for holding the sediment in the bank. Erosion occurs naturally in the stream, and so this meander, as it goes down, you'll see that this area that used to have the stream going through it, this is called a point bar. This happens at the inside of a meander. So on the outside, you'll notice it's scouring. On the inside of the point bar, you'll see trees start growing in there. Sycamores and willows and river birch will all start growing in there naturally. They'll be brought downstream, seeds will fall in, and they'll start growing naturally, and then that point bar will be held in place. But then you have this scour bar that hopefully will slough off in a natural setting and re-slope.
All right, so about 5 minutes later, we're following up on my channelized stream in this storm event, and it looks a little different than it did earlier, doesn't it? You notice the channel has widened out, and even though it looks roughly sinuous or meandering, it's mostly just wide and shallow. Unfortunately, this is a terrible habitat for fish because it's shallow. They don't have much shelter. There's not much oxygen in this water, so this would actually be a stream with very, very low biodiversity. You'd see mostly bluegill, sunfish, and worms, and maybe crayfish, and generalist species like that in there. Some of the other big things that we're seeing is we have a car. This car used to be on the stream bank, and this could represent a pasture, a field full of cattle, or something like that, or a house, and now it's in the stream bed. It didn't used to be. We have one house that's collapsing as we speak, and we have another house that was sitting right here that used to be high and dry, and now it's in the water. And the reason it did this is because we kept scouring and scouring and scouring this channel, hoping that it would stay in those banks. And as we see, it naturally wants to meander and does what it wants. It wants to not look like a straight stream. It wants to look like this over here. It wants to have that vegetation on the sides, and it wants to have that meander to it. And if we look underneath the stream table, we can take a look again at the sediment traps and just see the difference. It's pretty astounding. So our sediment trap is almost full. This is how much sediment and how much pollution is going into your streams from my stream over here. And we take a look at the other stream over there. Although we haven't run this through a storm scenario, which we will, we see there's just a small pile of sediment in here. And so this is a relatively stable system. It has very little sediment that's going downstream, very little eutrophication. There would not be much algae in this stream, and this would be full of fish and insects and all kinds of wonderful animals.
So with higher flows, as we've created here, you'll see a lot of this plastics, which in a natural system would be sediment flowing. This causes the water clarity, or the visibility in the water column, to decrease. This is bad for fish and the macroinvertebrate species, depending on what they eat. The visibility is low. In low flow, you don't see this. You see all the sediment fall out. And with discharge, large particles or large rocks will fall out more quickly than the small particles, depending on the flow rate. So whenever there's a lot of sediment in the water column, the fish, your biodiversity decreases. And in natural systems, they're acclimated to storm events that this would create. It usually takes, fish can just move around, but macroinvertebrates, if they get washed out, they usually take a little while to recolonize an area after it's been washed out. So the diversity won't be as great. But also you have to think disturbance is natural. Organisms need disturbance to create more biodiversity, and it's not a bad thing for these storm events, but you just don't want large storm events. But organisms are able to reacclimate, but the turbidity, it's carrying the sediment, and in that sediment there's found phosphorus and other nutrients that aren't that great for water quality. So you want to keep as much sediment in the banks as you can, but having a little bit is not a bad thing. Right now we're at a 500-year flood event. Is this what the water level is mimicking? To mitigate the erosion that happens due to these large flood events, having increased riparian buffers or your trees on the side of your creek, the best thing you can do is have more of those. If you're in a city landscape, having rain gardens or bioswales to catch your roof runoff are really great practices that you can do to decrease runoff from your property. Having huge swaths of land is not really feasible, especially in an urban setting. So having ways to catch your runoff, rain barrels are another great way. Then you can repurpose the water you catch in your rain barrel for your garden or watering your lawn. For farmers, if you have pasture land, obviously you need to graze that. We have, you can also aerate your pasture to increase water infiltration into your soil. That will decrease the amount of water going into the streams and keep it on the landscape. Just really any way to keep water on the landscape and not in the stream will help decrease erosion. So planting trees or other voluntary best management practices such as filter strips, growing native grasses and forbs, help reduce the flow of water into our streams and keep the water on the landscape.
The most important thing with stormwater is to spread it out and slow it down.
Okay.